She didn't know he was there. No one did. Lily's voice was soft, a lullaby, the kind that felt like a secret. Her fingers hovered above the piano keys, not yet pressing them, as the old man sat slumped in his chair. The clock above the fireplace struck midnight, and the world outside seemed to still. Inside, the quiet was thick, but Lily's voice broke through. She had no audience. She never did. She thought he was asleep, lost in his own world of fading memories. But what Lily didn't know was that Elliot, his son, was standing just behind the door listening. He had arrived hours ago, had waited, watching from a distance. He wasn't sure why he'd come, not really. He hadn't seen his father in years. The relationship had been strained, and the years had done little to heal the distance between them. He stood there, silent, not wanting to interrupt, not sure what to expect from the visit. As Lily's voice filled the room, something inside Elliot stirred. The song was old, something his mother used to sing. He never thought he'd hear it again. It was like a thread pulling at his heart, unraveling the cold exterior he'd built over the years. He stepped closer, careful not to make a sound, his eyes fixed on his father, unaware that he too was listening intently. The song spoke of love, of loss, of memories long forgotten. But for Elliot, it spoke of something deeper. His mother. He hadn't heard her name in so long. He hadn't let himself think about her, not for years. But now, hearing that song, he couldn't help himself. His heart pounded in his chest. Lily's voice faded as she stopped singing, her eyes meeting the floor, unsure of what had just happened. Her voice had always been her escape, her way of connecting with something beyond the everyday. She never imagined anyone would hear it. Not like this. But then Elliot spoke, his voice low, almost a whisper. "Who are you?" She looked up, startled. Her gaze met his, and for a moment she froze. The man standing before her was tall, his expensive suit a stark contrast to the worn piano and the humble room. His eyes were sharp, intense. He seemed like a man who always got what he wanted. But in that moment, his gaze softened. He wasn't the billionaire his reputation made him out to be. He was just a man, listening to something he hadn't expected. You're his son," she stammered, still caught off guard. The words left her lips before she could think. She didn't know why she said them, but she did. The truth was, she didn't know who he was. She didn't know what she had just stumbled into. All she knew was that the old man in the chair was more than just a stranger. He was someone's father. And the man standing in front of her, he was the one who had walked away. The silence stretched for a moment longer, and Lily stood frozen. She had heard his voice, but it wasn't the voice of an ordinary customer. This man, he wasn't just anyone. The realization hit her slowly, like the calm before a storm. I didn't mean to interrupt," Elliot said, his voice softer now, the sharp edge gone. He wasn't sure why he had come here, but in that moment something shifted. Lily didn't answer immediately. Her mind raced. She had seen many faces in this job, some rich, some poor, but none had ever looked like this man. He stood tall, his expression unreadable, yet there was a vulnerability in his eyes that unsettled her. "I'm sorry," she finally said, her voice trembling slightly. "I didn't know anyone was here." "It's fine," Elliot replied, his gaze lingering on her. "I didn't mean to eavesdrop, but the song." His words trailed off, and Lily felt the weight of his gaze. She looked away, feeling like she had done something wrong, even though she hadn't. "It's just something I do," she said quietly. "Sing, I mean. Helps me clear my mind." She avoided looking at him directly, focusing instead on the piano keys in front of her. The room felt too small now, the air thick with unspoken things. Elliot stayed silent for a moment, but then he stepped closer, his footsteps light but purposeful. "It was my mother's song," he said, as if the words had a life of their own. Lily turned her head slowly, meeting his eyes. There was something in his voice that made her feel like she had just opened a door into a past she had no right to know about. She didn't know what to say, so she just nodded, unsure if he needed her to say anything at all. "I don't hear it often," Elliot continued, his voice catching slightly. "Not from anyone. Not like that." Lily swallowed, her throat dry. The way he spoke made her want to say something, anything, but she felt a lump form in her chest. She wasn't sure why, but the heaviness of his words seemed to settle over her. I didn't know, she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't know who you were. The confession hung in the air between them, and Elliot's eyes softened just a fraction. He gave a small, almost imperceptible nod. I'm his son, he said, glancing toward his father still slumped in the chair by the fire. My father. He paused, as if finding the words hard to come by. He hasn't spoken to me in years. I didn't expect to find him like this. His voice cracked, the edge of bitterness still there, though buried beneath a layer of something else. Something raw, something real. Lily didn't know what to say. She had never been in a position like this. Never imagined that the man she had been singing to was connected to someone like Elliot. She had been a stranger to them both, and yet in some strange way they had been connected by the same song. You don't have to say anything, Elliot continued, his voice softer now. But I think you should know. He doesn't have much time left. I don't know how to fix things between us. I don't know if it's even possible. Lily watched him for a long moment, his words sinking in. She felt a sudden wave of sympathy for him, for his father, for the years of regret and missed chances that had brought them both here. Maybe you don't need to fix anything, she said finally, her voice more certain now. Maybe you just need to be here. That's enough. There was a long silence, but this time it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a silence that spoke volumes, a silence that held more meaning than any words could express. The next morning, Lily arrived at the cafe early, as usual. The sun had barely risen, casting a soft golden light over the small room. The stillness of the morning was interrupted only by the sound of the coffee machine and the faint murmur of the early customers. She moved methodically, cleaning tables and organizing the supplies. Her mind, however, was miles away, still replaying the conversation from the night before. Elliot's words echoed in her mind. Asterisk, maybe you don't need to fix anything. Maybe you just need to be here. Asterisk, she hadn't expected him to say that. In a way, it felt like the weight of his entire life was on her shoulders now. She didn't know what it meant to be here for someone, let alone a man like Elliot. She had always lived in the moment, never really thinking about the bigger picture. But that night, everything had shifted. The door opened and Lily looked up. It was Elliot standing in the doorway, a little less polished than she was used to seeing him. His suit was less crisp, his hair a bit disheveled, as if he had rushed out of the house without a second thought. His eyes met hers and for a moment, they just stared at each other. He stepped inside, glancing at the empty tables before making his way toward her. Lily felt her heart skip a beat, unsure of why he was there, or what this visit would mean. Can we talk? He asked, his voice softer than before. She nodded, the butterflies in her stomach rising again. She motioned toward the back room where they could have a moment of privacy. They sat down in silence, both unsure of how to begin. Elliot was the first to break it. I've been thinking a lot, he started, his hands fiddling with the edge of the table. About what you said last night. About being here. He paused, searching her face for some sign of understanding. It's been so long since I've seen my father, and yet you made me realize something last night that I've been avoiding. Maybe being here with him in whatever way I can. Maybe that's all I need to do. Lily watched him closely, seeing a side of him she hadn't seen before. Vulnerable, uncertain, but strangely calm. It was as if he had let go of the burden of trying to fix everything, trying to control everything. You're not the only one who's been avoiding things, Lily said quietly, her voice surprisingly steady. We all have our own reasons. But maybe that's what connects us all. We all carry something we don't want to face. And yet we're still here, still moving forward. Elliot nodded, absorbing her words. I never thought of it that way, he said softly, his gaze drifting to the window. He seemed lost in thought for a moment, his mind perhaps working through a million things at once. I think I need to see him, he added finally, looking back at her. My father. I put it off for too long. And I don't want to wait anymore. Lily gave a small knowing smile. Then go, she said simply. Sometimes we need to take that first step, even if we don't know what comes after. But you don't have to do it alone. There was a long silence between them, a silence filled with understanding. Then Elliot stood, his face more at peace than it had been the night before. Thank you, he said, and for the first time Lily saw the gratitude in his eyes. For being here. Lily nodded, watching him leave. As he walked out of the cafe, she felt a strange sense of closure. It wasn't the end of the story, but it was the beginning of something new. For him and maybe even for her. The next few days passed in a blur for Lily. She continued to work, her routine unchanged, but there was something different in the air. She kept thinking about Elliot's words. Asterisk maybe being here is enough star. It had been a simple phrase, but it had stuck with her. She hadn't realized how much she had been running from her own life until she heard it. It was easier to avoid things, easier to stay in motion, never confronting what really mattered. But now she was left with questions of her own. Her thoughts were interrupted one morning as she arrived at the cafe. The door chimed, signaling the start of another day. She had just started wiping down the counters when she saw him again. Elliot. He was standing in the doorway, a hesitant look on his face. Lily's heart skipped a beat, but she didn't say anything right away. She simply nodded at him, her hand still busy with the cloth. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice quieter than before. She motioned toward the back again. This time there was no hesitation in her step as they moved to the small corner where they could speak in private. "You look like you have something to say," Lily remarked, trying to keep her voice light, but her heart was beating fast. "I do," Elliot said, looking down at his hands, clearly unsure how to start. He took a deep breath as if preparing himself. "I went to see him. My father. I told him I was sorry. And I don't know what I was expecting, but it wasn't that." His voice faltered for a moment, and Lily simply waited, letting him gather his thoughts. "I didn't think it would matter. I thought I was too late. But when I walked into that room, and I saw him, I realized something. It's never too late." "Not really." Lily listened, her eyes locked on his, recognizing the raw emotion behind his words. "I think I've been running away from my family for so long. I forgot what it meant to be close to them," he continued. "What it means to just be there, without all the pressure of needing to fix things or make them perfect." Lily nodded slowly. She understood more than he knew. "Sometimes it's enough to just show up," she said softly. Elliot looked at her, his expression softening. "You said that last time," he murmured, his lips curving into a faint smile. "I didn't get it then, but I think I do now." The moment was quiet, but there was something in the silence between them that felt like a weight lifting. "I didn't expect you to be here," he added after a beat. "I didn't expect to be here either," Lily replied, her smile faint but real. "But sometimes life pushes us into places we didn't plan for." Elliot exhaled, his shoulders relaxing for the first time in days. "I guess I needed someone to remind me of that." "We all do," Lily said, looking away for a moment, the weight of her own words settling in. "You're not alone in this, you know." Elliot studied her for a long moment, as if seeing her for the first time. "Thanks," he said, his voice soft. "For listening." She didn't answer at first. She simply nodded, unsure if words were enough. But they seemed to be in that moment. And maybe that was enough too. The next few weeks felt like a blur to Lily. Life had a way of moving faster when you least expected it. The cafe was still the same, quiet, familiar, a safe haven, but something inside her had shifted. She no longer felt the need to escape. She didn't know when exactly it happened, but she realized that she had stopped running from her own life. Her mornings were filled with the same routine, but now there was something different in the air. Something lighter. Elliot had kept his promise. He came by the cafe every so often, never for long, but long enough for them to exchange a few words. He didn't seem like the man she met months ago, the one who had been running away from everything. There was something softer about him now, more at ease. One particular evening, after the dinner rush had slowed down, Elliot walked in, looking a little more tired than usual. Lily caught his eye and without thinking smiled. He returned it, but there was a hint of something else in his gaze. "Can we talk?" he asked, his voice low, almost hesitant. Lily nodded, motioning for him to follow her to the back. This time there was no awkwardness, no distance between them. They had reached a place where words no longer felt forced, where the silence between them was comfortable. "I've been thinking," Elliot started, sitting across from her at the small table in the back room, "about my dad. And about everything I thought I knew about myself. About life. His words were slow, measured, like he was still piecing them together. I thought I had to fix everything. Fix my relationship with him, fix my life, fix what I messed up. But I'm realizing now that it's not about fixing things. It's about showing up. Being there. Even when you don't know what's going to happen. Lily listened, nodding quietly. She didn't speak immediately, not because she didn't know what to say, but because she knew exactly what he meant. It was something she had come to realize on her own in the past few weeks. Life wasn't about having all the answers. It was about being present in the moments that mattered. I didn't get that before, he continued, looking at her with a kind of openness she hadn't seen in him before. I thought I had to control everything, but sometimes it's enough just to be. Lily smiled softly, her eyes meeting his. Yeah, she said, her voice steady, the words feeling more real than they had in a long time. Sometimes that's all you can do. And it's enough. There was a long pause between them, but it wasn't awkward. It was comfortable. Elliot exhaled, the tension in his shoulders easing a bit. Thank you, he said quietly, his voice sincere. For showing me that. For being here. Lily's heart swelled with an unfamiliar warmth. She didn't know exactly what had changed, but she knew she wasn't alone in this anymore. And maybe for the first time in a long time she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. You don't need to thank me, she replied softly, her eyes meeting his. We're both here, and that's enough. For a moment they just sat there, the world outside quiet, the air between them filled with an understanding that didn't need to be spoken. And in that silence, both of them knew that the journey they had started was far from over. But maybe, just maybe, they were ready to face it together. The weeks that followed felt different for both of them. Lily continued to work at the cafe, her routine unchanged, but there was a new sense of calm in her heart. She didn't feel the weight of the world pressing on her shoulders anymore. She had started to let go of the constant need to fix things. She simply existed in the moment, finding peace in the quiet rhythms of her life. Elliot, on the other hand, seemed more at ease with himself. He still visited the cafe every now and then, but now their conversations weren't rushed or filled with the same heaviness they once carried. They spoke more freely, like old friends who had known each other forever, even if they hadn't. It was a strange thing the way their paths had crossed. Neither of them had expected to find what they did in each other. One day, as the sun began to dip below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the cafe, Elliot walked in, a slight smile playing on his lips. Lily was finishing up wiping down a table when she noticed him. She looked up and smiled in return, the warmth in her chest spreading. Hey, Elliot said. His voice light, but there was a certain depth to it. Hey, Lily replied, setting the rag down. She motioned for him to take a seat at the counter. As he sat, she noticed the tiredness in his eyes, but it wasn't the same as before. It was softer, more reflective. I was thinking about our last conversation, he began after a moment, and I realized something. I've been so focused on fixing everything that I forgot the most important part, the people I care about. My dad. I've been trying so hard to make things right, but I missed the point. I should have just been there, just shown up like you said. Lily leaned against the counter, watching him closely. There was a vulnerability in his words, something he hadn't shown before. It's not easy to let go of the need to fix things, she said softly, but it's the only way to truly heal. Elliot nodded, his expression thoughtful. Yeah, I think I'm starting to get that. I've been spending so much time trying to be the perfect son, the perfect businessman, but in the end it's the moments like this, the simple, real moments that matter the most. Lily smiled, her heart swelling with a quiet pride for him. You're figuring it out, she said. And that's enough. Sometimes it's not about making everything perfect. It's about being true to yourself. Elliot studied her for a moment, as if seeing her in a new light. You know, he said with a small smile, you're not just a waitress. You've got this way of making people see things differently. Lily laughed softly, shrugging. I'm just a person who's been there, in the quiet moments, learning the hard way. I'm no expert. Maybe not, Elliot agreed. But you're the kind of person who makes you want to be better. I think that's why I keep coming back here. There was a long pause between them, a comfortable silence. Lily looked at him, realizing just how far they had both come. I'm glad you're here, she said simply. Me too, Elliot replied, his smile genuine. The connection between them was different now, more grounded, and for the first time, they both understood that it wasn't about fixing everything. It was about learning, growing, and being present. As Elliot stood to leave, he turned back to her one last time. Thank you, he said, his voice sincere, for being here. Lily watched him walk out of the cafe, a soft smile on her face. She didn't need to say anything. She understood now, too. It was enough to just show up. Days turned into weeks, and Lily found herself in a new rhythm. The cafe was busier than ever, but there was a calmness in the air that hadn't been there before. It was a quiet sort of peace, the kind that came with understanding. She had stopped running from her past, and in doing so, she had found herself exactly where she needed to be. One evening, as she closed up the cafe, the door opened again. She looked up, surprised to see Elliot standing there, looking a little out of breath. Hey, he said, his voice warm but tinged with uncertainty. Can we talk? Lily smiled softly, motioning for him to come in. Of course. He stepped inside, and for a moment, the noise of the world outside seemed to fade away. It was just the two of them, in the quiet space they had shared many times before. He stood there for a moment, looking around, as if searching for the right words. I've been thinking a lot about what you said. Elliot began, his voice steady but filled with emotion. About just showing up. And I think you were right. I've spent so much time worrying about the future. About fixing things that I missed out on the people who mattered the most. Lily watched him closely, sensing the weight of his words. And what about your father? She asked gently. Has that changed? Elliot nodded slowly. It has. I went back to see him again. This time it was different. We didn't talk about fixing everything. We just spent time together. And for the first time, I felt like we were on the same page. His eyes met hers, and Lily could see the sincerity in them. I think that's all we really need, he continued. Not to fix things, but to just be there. Lily's heart swelled with pride for him. She had watched him grow, seen him wrestle with his past, and now here he was learning to let go of the things he couldn't control. I'm proud of you, she said softly, her voice filled with warmth. Elliot smiled, a small but genuine smile that reached his eyes. Thank you. For everything. For showing me that sometimes just showing up is enough. Lily reached out, her hand resting on the counter between them. You've got this, she said. You don't need to have all the answers. You've already made the most important step. Elliot stood there for a moment, his hand hovering over the counter. Then slowly, he reached out and took hers. It was a simple gesture, but it meant more than words could say. I think I've finally figured that out, he said quietly, his voice filled with newfound peace. The moment hung in the air between them, and for the first time in a long time, both of them knew that they didn't have to carry the weight of the world on their shoulders. They didn't need to have all the answers. All they needed was to show up, to be present, and to trust that everything else would fall into place. With that, Elliot smiled once more and turned to leave. Thanks again, Lily, he said, his voice soft but filled with gratitude. For everything. Lily smiled back, watching him leave. As the door closed behind him, she felt a quiet satisfaction settle over her. It wasn't the end, but it was a beginning. And that was enough. The days grew warmer, and with it, a sense of change settled over the cafe. Lily felt it, a shift in the air, in herself. There was no rushing, no need to fill every moment with noise. She had learned over the past few months the beauty in just being present. The quiet mornings, the steady rhythm of serving coffee, the soft chatter of regulars. It all felt familiar, comforting. She no longer felt the burden of needing more. It was enough. Elliot had kept his distance for a while, focusing on his father, on his own growth. They exchanged a few words now and then when he came into the cafe, but each time, it felt like there was something deeper, something unspoken. And then one afternoon, as Lily wiped down a table by the window, she saw him walk in. It wasn't unusual for him to come by, but there was something different in the way he moved, in the way he looked at her. This time there was no hesitation, no walls between them. He walked up to the counter, his eyes meeting hers with a sense of understanding she hadn't seen before. Hey, Elliot said, his voice calm, but there was Something else, something more grounded. Hey, Lily replied, her heart beating a little faster than usual. There was no rush now, no need for pretense. He sat down at the counter, the weight of the world somehow lighter in his presence. I wanted to tell you something, Elliot began, his fingers tapping lightly on the counter. You've been right about a lot of things. About showing up. About not needing to fix everything. Lily nodded, waiting for him to continue. I think I've finally figured out how to stop trying to fix everything, and just be where I am, he said, his voice steady but his eyes searching. I spent so long thinking I had to change things to make them better. But now I see that sometimes the only thing that needs to change is me. Lily smiled softly, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. You're getting it, she said simply. He looked at her, his gaze softening. I've been trying to fix things with my dad. I think we're getting there. Not everything is perfect, but we're talking. And that's enough for now. There was a quiet moment between them, and Lily could see the change in him. He wasn't the man who had walked into her cafe all those months ago, so unsure of himself, so caught in the need to control everything. He was someone new, someone who had found peace in simply being. I'm proud of you, she said, her voice sincere. Elliot smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. I never thought I'd hear that from anyone, he said quietly. But thank you. I needed to hear it. They sat in silence for a while, the world moving around them, but for that moment it was just the two of them, understanding without words. And for the first time in a long time, Lily felt like she had everything she needed right here, right now. She didn't need to fix things, didn't need to be anyone else. She was exactly where she was meant to be. It was a rainy afternoon when Lily received the unexpected phone call. She had just finished serving a few regulars at the cafe when her phone buzzed in her pocket. Surprised to see Elliot's name on the screen, she answered, her heart skipping a beat. Lily. Elliot's voice came through, a mix of excitement and nervousness. I need to tell you something. Lily smiled at the sound of his voice, sensing that something had changed. What's up? She asked, wiping her hands on the apron. I'm finally going to do it, he said, his words coming quickly, like he couldn't get them out fast enough. I'm going to ask my dad to move in with me. The words hung in the air between them, and Lily felt a rush of emotion for him. She had seen how far he'd come, from the man who had been so afraid of facing his past to this moment of courage. That's incredible, Elliot, she said, her voice soft but full of pride. I know it's not going to be easy, but I feel like it's the right thing to do. I've been thinking about it for a while now, and I think I'm ready. She could hear the determination in his voice, the same determination she had seen in him when he first started facing his past. I'm so proud of you, Lily said, her heart swelling. You've come so far. I couldn't have done it without you, Elliot replied, his voice quieter now, more sincere. You've been there every step of the way. You've helped me see that it's okay to not have everything figured out, to just be there, and I think that's what my dad needs too. Lily felt a lump form in her throat at his words. You don't need to thank me, she said, her voice steady despite the emotions swirling inside her. You've done the hard work. You've made the decision, and that's what matters. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, and Lily could almost hear the smile in Elliot's voice when he spoke again. Thank you, he said softly, for showing me that it's okay to let go of the need to fix everything. For showing me that just showing up is enough. Lily let out a small laugh, the sound warm and genuine. You've got this, Elliot, she said, her words filled with conviction. You've already done the hardest part. After a few more moments of conversation, they hung up and Lily stood in the cafe, looking out the window at the rain. The world seemed quieter somehow, as if everything was falling into place. She didn't know what would happen next for Elliot or for herself, but for the first time in a long time she felt at peace. She had learned to trust in the moments, to trust in the people around her, and most of all to trust in herself. As the rain continued to fall outside, she smiled to herself, knowing that whatever came next, she was ready. It was a week later when Elliot finally made the call. He had been nervous, pacing around his apartment, his mind racing with doubts. But he knew it was time. He had spent too many years avoiding the conversation, and he wasn't going to let fear control him anymore. As he dialed the number, his hands shook, but he took a deep breath and waited. The phone rang for what felt like forever, and then on the other end, his father's voice answered. Elliot. His father's voice was old, tired, but still filled with the same authority it had always had. Dad, Elliot began, but his words caught in his throat. He hadn't planned for this moment. He had rehearsed what he wanted to say 100 times, but now that he was finally here, nothing seemed right. What is it, son? His father's voice was softer now, sensing the hesitation in Elliot's tone. I've been thinking a lot, Elliot said, his words coming out slowly. And I've realized that I don't want to keep living like this. We've spent so many years apart, and I don't want it to be that way anymore. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Elliot could hear his father breathing, but he didn't say anything. I know I've made mistakes, Elliot continued, his voice steady now. And I know I can't fix everything, but I think we need to try. I want you to move in with me, Dad. I want to be there for you. I want to make up for lost time. The words hung in the air between them. It felt like the entire world was holding its breath. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, his father spoke. You're serious? His father's voice was quiet, almost as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. Yes, Elliot replied, his voice firm. I'm serious. I know it's not going to be easy, but I don't want to wait anymore. I want to try for both of us. There was another pause, and then his father let out a heavy sigh. I didn't think you'd come around, his father said softly. But you've grown up, Elliot. You've learned. And I'm proud of you. I'm proud that you're willing to give this a chance. Elliot felt a weight lift off his shoulders. He hadn't expected his father to say that, but hearing those words felt like a blessing. I'll make the arrangements, his father continued. But you have to promise me one thing. What? Elliot asked, his heart racing with anticipation. Promise me that you won't give up on me even when things get hard, his father said. I've been alone for so long, and I'm not sure I can do this without you. But if you're really serious, if you really want this, then I'm willing to try too. Elliot's chest tightened with emotion. I promise, Dad. I won't give up. We'll figure it out together. The words felt real now, stronger than anything he had ever said. There was no turning back. It wasn't going to be easy, but it was the right thing to do. And for the first time in a long time, Elliot felt like he wasn't alone. He had his father, and his father had him. That was enough. The days that followed were filled with a quiet sort of anticipation. Elliot made the necessary arrangements, clearing space in his home for his father. It wasn't easy. He had never been the best at asking for help or opening up to others, but for the first time he wasn't afraid of the challenges ahead. When the day finally came for his father to move in, Elliot stood by the door waiting. He had gone over the details in his mind 100 times, but nothing could have prepared him for what it would feel like to have his father under his roof again. The doorbell rang and Elliot's heart skipped a beat. He opened the door to find his father standing there, a small suitcase in hand, looking more fragile than he remembered. But there was something else too, something that made him stand a little taller, something that made him feel like the years of separation were starting to fade away. Hey, Dad, Elliot said softly, stepping aside to let him in. It's good to see you. His father looked at him for a moment, then smiled. Slow, genuine smile. I never thought I'd be doing this, he said, his voice steady but with a touch of emotion. But here I am. Elliot felt a lump in his throat. Yeah, here you are, he said, his voice barely a whisper. They stood there for a moment, just looking at each other, the years of distance between them slowly closing. Let's get you settled in, Elliot said, finally breaking the silence. They moved through the house together, unpacking a few of his father's things, setting them in place. It was simple, but it felt right. As they worked, they didn't talk much. There was no need for words. The comfort of just being together in the same space was enough. That evening after dinner, they sat on the couch, the television on but barely noticed. It was one of those quiet moments that spoke volumes. Elliot looked over at his father, the weight of everything they had been through sitting between them. I'm glad you're here, Elliot said quietly, his voice filled with sincerity. His father nodded slowly, his gaze soft. I'm glad to be here, he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. It wasn't perfect, not yet, but it was a start. And that was enough. They sat there side by side in the quiet of the evening, both of them knowing that this moment was the beginning of something new. A new chapter. It wasn't about fixing the past. It wasn't about pretending everything was okay. It was about showing up. And for the first time in a long time, they were both there, ready to face the future together. Weeks passed, and the transition to having his father live with him wasn't as difficult as Elliot had feared. They had settled into a quiet routine. His father, though frail, had begun to open up more, telling stories of his past, of the things he'd never shared before. Elliot listened, learning things about his father that he hadn't known, understanding the man behind the strict exterior. It was a quiet understanding that formed between them, not needing many words. One evening after dinner, they sat together on the couch again. The television was on, but it was just background noise. Elliot found himself more at peace than he had been in years. He wasn't sure what had changed, but he felt it like a weight lifting from his shoulders. His father was there, and that was enough. "You're quiet tonight," his father said, breaking the silence. Elliot looked over at him, surprised that his father had noticed. He hadn't realized how much time had passed since the conversation they'd had weeks ago. "I've been thinking," Elliot replied, his voice steady, "about everything. About how much time we've missed, and how much we can still make up for." His father nodded, his gaze softening. "I've thought about that too," he said quietly. "But I think we're doing the right thing, son. We're here now, and that's what matters." Elliot smiled, feeling the truth of his father's words. He had spent so many years focusing on the past, trying to fix things that couldn't be fixed, that he hadn't realized the present was all he had. "I never thought I'd hear you say that," Elliot said, a hint of disbelief in his voice. "But you're right." His father gave him a knowing look, and Elliot could see the years of regret in his eyes. "We've both made mistakes," his father said, his voice thick with emotion. "But that's what life is, isn't it? Learning from those mistakes and trying to do better." Elliot didn't know what to say. His father's words hit him harder than he expected. It wasn't about fixing everything, about making up for lost time. It was about being here in the present and letting the past fade away. The next morning, as Elliot prepared for work, he paused for a moment, looking over at his father who was sitting at the table, reading the newspaper. It was a simple scene, one that felt familiar and comfortable. Elliot realized that this was what he had always wanted, a sense of normalcy, of peace. "I'm glad you're here, Dad," Elliot said, his voice filled with quiet sincerity. His father looked up from the newspaper, meeting his gaze. "I'm glad to be here, son," he replied, his voice steady and filled with emotion. And for the first time in a long time, Elliot knew that everything was going to be okay. It wasn't about fixing the past or trying to control the future. It was about being present, about showing up for the people who mattered most. And he was ready to face whatever came next, knowing that he wasn't alone. Months passed, and life for Elliot and his father slowly settled into a rhythm. There were still difficult days, moments of silence that spoke louder than words, but there were also quiet, peaceful mornings where Elliot would find his father sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of coffee in hand, reading the newspaper. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And for the first time, Elliot found comfort in that. One evening, after a long day at work, Elliot came home to find his father waiting for him on the couch. There was something different about the way his father looked at him now, like the weight of the past was finally starting to lift. "I've been thinking," his father said when Elliot sat down beside him, "about everything we've been through." Elliot looked at him, waiting for him to continue. "It's been a long road," his father continued, his voice soft. "But I think we've made it through." Elliot nodded, feeling the truth of his words. They had been through so much, both of them, and yet here they were, still standing. "I don't think I've ever told you this, son," his father said, his voice thick with emotion. "But I'm proud of you. I've always been proud of you." Elliot felt his heart swell at his father's words. It wasn't something he had ever heard growing up, and for a moment he was overwhelmed with emotion. "Thanks, Dad," Elliot said, his voice barely above a whisper. "That means a lot." His father smiled, a smile that reached his eyes, softening the years of tension between them. "I may not have always shown it," his father said, his voice quieter now. But I've always been proud of you. I've just had a hard time saying it. Elliot sat there for a moment, absorbing the weight of his father's words. For years he had searched for validation, for acknowledgement, and now he was hearing it. It was a small thing, but it felt like everything. I'm glad you're here, Elliot said, his voice steady. I never thought we'd get to this point, but I'm glad we're here now. His father nodded, the smile never leaving his face. Me too, son, he said quietly. Me too. The room was quiet for a moment, the weight of their words hanging in the air. But it wasn't a heavy silence. It was a peaceful one, a silence that spoke of healing, of understanding, of acceptance. Elliot felt a sense of calm wash over him. They were finally on the same page, and it felt like everything had come full circle. They didn't need to talk about the past anymore. They didn't need to fix anything. All they needed was to be here together in the present. And that was enough. As they sat there side by side, Elliot knew that whatever the future held, they could face it together. The past no longer held them back. They had moved forward, and the journey ahead felt a little less daunting, a little more hopeful.